Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, I guess, for some of you.
There might be morning in some places. I have no idea.
Well, I couldn't figure that out earlier this
Potentially.
morning. Welcome to Divine Disbelief. I am Nathaniel.
And I am Susan. We are standing in a beautiful place.
Yeah, you can see this is our deck.
Yeah.
Well, it's part of it. It
goes around.
Yeah,
It's pretty awesome.
pretty awesome.
Yeah. We have moved away from Texas, despite being, still kind of Beto stands. We moved away from Texas. We are now in the Portland, Oregon metro.
Yeah.
It is absolutely beautiful here. We are currently still under, self-isolation and social distancing and things of that nature. But it's all good because then we get to hang out with y'all. So it's always fun.
Yeah, this is the last time we did a video, I think, was in February. Something like that.
I think so.
I think it was February. It was before all of this stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
And we have obviously been, affected by that. But we're up here in Oregon now, and in the Portland metro.
Mm-hmm.
It is a gorgeous day.
Yeah.
It's the second day or third day in a row with no rain.
Yeah.
So
it's a surprise in Portland.
Yes,
when
she brought it
rain.
with her.
I did. I don't know how I did, but I somehow did. I don't know.
If you are commenting, by the way.
We can't see anything.
Nope. Appreciate your comment.
So sorry.
Yeah, I'd have to. I can try and look here in a little bit, but can't see anything right now.
Yeah.
But really, great to be able to do this again finally.
Mm-hmm.
We know that we have missed coming on here and having these conversations and getting into the deep dive. She's got an amazing thing to go over this evening.
It's a very, very deep dive.
Yes, it is. No, hey, that's the stuff that we like.
Right.
There's a lot of news.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously we've been off for like a month.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things going on right now.
What did you remember when Obama was on the whatever it was with David Letterman?
Mm-hmm.
And he like comes out and he's like, so what's going on? And he's like, did I miss anything? That's basically what we've done, because stuff you would expect to happen over the course of a year has happened over the course of the month or so that we have taken the time here. So, but we are very excited you're here. And with that, see, we are in the age of technology.
Yes.
And we're going to use our phones for our notes. Yes.
And I have a pop socket, so that really helps with the fact that I have to hold both of these right now. We need a mic stand.
I got another notification that we're live.
Yes,
by the way, if
same.
you noticed it earlier, it's because I put hotkeys on the computer and didn't realize it. And so, yeah, that was fun. You're always learning.
One day we'll get a mic stand.
Yep.
So we can just stand here and do this. But until then, I'm a human mic stand.
Yep.
So it's all good.
She's fabulous. She said she wanted to hold it. So we're going to go through some news here fairly quickly if we can. But down in Tennessee, right? Some of the lesbian moms or something like that. That's the top one that you put in there.
I did. I have a whole bunch of news stories that that are in here. You want to go over these? Because
sure, yeah.
You're I'm the deep dive this week.
Yeah, absolutely. So you got some down in. It is in Tennessee. I think it's Newtown, Tennessee, is the way it's pronounced.
I believe so.
It had some lesbian moms. They were suing a gym teacher, or they are, for giving anti-gay sermons.
Yes.
It's a gym teacher, Knox County and physical education teacher, alleging that he used sports to promote his anti-gay religious beliefs. I believe that.
Yeah, I do too.
Sports have been notoriously and historically very exclusive.
Yeah.
And
really
also, for a lot of times, also very, very, if it's the male side, very testosterone driven.
Oh, yeah.
And I can remember insults that I received, as well as others that had to do with, we weren't man enough, and a lot of slurs that weren't considered slurs. And apparently it's at, they have a son it's at a middle school there. And he apparently, this person, last name Comer, allegedly forced a young boy to attend regular anti-gay sermons before he could participate in basketball.
That is just
Yep, and they had to
They
participate in Teens for Christ, and that's you can't do that.
No, you really can't.
Turns out that's unconstitutional.
It is entirely unconstitutional. Don't do these kinds of things, basically.
Yeah.
If you are watching and you want to do these kinds of things, just don't. It's not a good idea.
So the lawsuit says that the mandatory religious meetings violate the free exercise clause of the First Amendment. Mm-hmm. Now, that's what we just mentioned. Apparently, the spokeswoman for the Knox County schools, and by the way, we'll have all of the links to everything we talk about in the description.
Afterwards, that is.
Said that students are not required to attend Bible study as a prerequisite to playing basketball at West Valley Middle School or any other Knox County school. And that's great.
Yeah, I'm glad that they're following the Constitution in that sense. That's always fun.
Somebody's child is not happy. And I don't know they can.
I don't think you can hear it. Yeah,
but,
I don't think I can hear it.
But that's not all that is about, because even when you offer these kind of classes, because it is religiously based, it violates that free exercise and establishment clause, and it opens up this doorway, as I mentioned, not only in like the sports world, but also in society, for ostracization, especially among young people. Mm-hmm. If you choose not to attend these things, especially at a predominantly Christian area, it can lead to some really like forced out of societal, and you could talk about middle school.
Yeah, which is an awful enough time anyway.
Yeah.
So it's like, come on. And to me, this is the same sort of thing as the when the coaches do the mass baptism of all of their players.
South Carolina.
Yeah, it's the same sort of thing where it's like, you can't do this. Just can't.
We know these things because we talk about them on almost every show.
Yeah. Because it always happens. These
folks are like, look, man, people are going to be Christian or not, right? And it's always Christians, by the way. Like, stop it.
Yeah.
I made a Twitter post not too long ago, on the 30th of March or something like that. And it went through the top 10 richest pastors in America, and they have a combined net worth of $1.06 billion with a B.
With a B.
I think that was a B. It's reversed on the screen, so I'm pretty certain it was.
Yeah.
And they have, as far as I could tell, donated of their own personal net worth a grand total of dollars.
Goggles.
So that's $0, as far as I could tell. And one of our first, I remember when I was putting this together and I looked at you, because our office is inside right now, and we sit across from each other at a table. I looked over the computer monitor, at least mine, and I said, did you know that Joel Osteen is only worth $40 million?
And I'm like, only?
Yeah. Talk
only
about
40 million?
Context of the word only.
Yeah.
We were very surprised that he was, not. He didn't have more money.
Not on the upper scale of all of these.
Yes.
It's gross.
Turns out that there was one person people were surprised was not on the list. Mm-hmm. And that is one of the president's advisors, Paula White.
And if you remember a couple 2 shows ago, I think 2 shows ago, I did my deep dive on Paula White and about how she has basically run churches into the ground and not paid their bills and things of that nature. So she's pretty terrible.
She also apparently was allegedly in a extramarital affair with Benny Hinn.
Oh.
Yeah. He is on the list, by the way.
Today I learned.
Yeah, I learned it the other day. I'm not involved in church gossip and things like that, or just gossip in general. But that was something that more than a few people spoke about. The number one thing, because for whatever reason that tweet gained some traction, not just on Twitter, but apparently on Facebook.
Yeah, somebody screenshotted it and put it on Facebook, and one of my friends shared it, and I was just all like, that's my boyfriend.
Yeah, somebody put it in Discord today, and I was like, I recognize that.
It's like, oh, that's him. That's
the
him.
number one comment was, tax these motherfuckers.
Yeah.
Or somewhere of that variant.
Yep.
So, but Paula White, I mentioned something like this with Kenneth Copeland, right? Because if there's anything that grifters going to do, they're going to grift.
Yep.
And I tell you what, you cannot preach the prosperity gospel unless you prosper. And I say you prosper, I mean them.
Yeah, it's always the preachers that prosper off of their prosperity gospel preachings.
Yes. And Paula White is no different.
So
She, I agree. She is awful. This comes from Right Wing Watch, which I love these folks at Right Wing Watch.
Same.
Now, I've always found that their sources are credible. They use a lot of like heavy language that's very biased.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's called Right Wing Watch.
Yeah.
But Kyle says this was on the first. He reported on the 1st of April, but this is true. Paula, he's talking about Paula White, and he says about her that she said the president has shown, quote, I said divisive.
I mean, that's true.
I'm correct. The decisive leadership. I've gotten to see that leadership in himself, his administration, his family in unprecedented times. There is a great calm and peace for most Americans. Gallup polls show that. So much shows that due to his leadership. I need
a citation for that.
Apparently, well, there was a Gallup poll at that time that said that the majority of people, it never got above 50%, approved of his handling of the coronavirus pandemic. First off, really?
What?
It's like apparently 27% of Democrats. What is wrong with you people?
Yeah.
Do you not
What's
live?
going on there?
Are all of you in ivory towers? Are all of you Paula White?
Apparently so.
And since then, by the way, plummeted.
Yeah.
And she says that it's a shame people take the cheap shots. Let's have the right attitude. Let's have the right thoughts. Like, you go, President. You want to help all people. Thank you. And then, of course, she goes on and she asks people for money.
Yeah.
She asks people for money because, and it's not in this article, but I know because I've seen the video, and she asked them for money during this difficult time. Mm-hmm. I'd like to know where her difficult time comes from.
So I was listening to a podcast on the way driving up here from Texas, and they were talking about Paula White, of course. And I don't remember which podcast it was. I'm sorry. Talking about Paula White and her prosperity gospel stuff. And they said, you know, she was asking people to donate, to give her, rather, because it's donation, to give her $91 because of Psalm 91.
Yes.
Which is like, pray for your leaders or something?
Something like that.
Something to that effect. And the hosts were just all like, well, why not just round it up and make it an even 100 then? Yeah. I mean, that's probably what she's going to say is, you might as well, right? I mean,
Yep, and this is, of course, Kenneth Copeland said, well, among the many things, he said some pretty crazy shit and dangerous stuff. But one of the things he said, and I quoted this in the tweet thread, was, you take that tithe and you get it into the church no matter how. If you have to slide it, put it in an envelope and slide it under or between the doors. Yeah, Kenneth Copeland, you have, I'm not joking, over $700 million.
Yeah.
You can fuck off.
Yeah.
And by the way, I also have said very recently that it is not the time to say, I hope the president fails at this. Because if the president fails and the administration fails, a lot more people are going to die.
Accurate.
And that's bad.
Yep.
Yes, that includes, if you're a Republican, it includes Democrats. It's bad if they die. And it's also the other way around. Don't hope people die.
Right.
That's just, really? I hear people say that, and I'm like, what about the death penalty? Oh, I'm against that. No, you're fucking not.
Yeah.
I've said that. It does not mean that you can't be critical. And you should be. They're not doing a good job.
No.
No, they're not. So, yeah, Paula White.
Yeah, she's a piece of work.
One of the other, one of the other folks that says, don't make it political, and then turns around and says something about Democrats.
Yeah, it makes it entirely political, right?
Oh, this is one of my favorites in Louisiana.
Yes.
So, also down in Tampa. Remember that guy, that pastor that I was trolling for like 2 weeks down in Tampa?
Yes.
Retweeted all of his stuff.
Yes.
Apparently in Louisiana as well, there is a pastor, and I read this last week. His name is Tony Spell. I know him from memory. I don't like to know that. Like, I know Robert Jeffress from memory, not for good reasons.
No.
He was basically in Louisiana, Governor John Bel Edwards said, you can't be in crowds of more than like 10 or 20 or more, or something crazy like that, right? Not crazy, but some number like that. It wasn't a very high number. And this church said, fuck you, because Jesus didn't say that I need to listen to leaders that are elected or put in place over me. That's not something Jesus would have said. We're going to go to church. And so this pastor in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, not only did they have church, but they bussed people in.
Yes.
I don't want to hear anybody ever say that you're mad that people are busing people to the polls when you, during a pandemic, are busing people to maybe kill them.
Yeah.
He faces now, but he is, because there is either karma or you didn't listen to Jesus, which I think is the same thing.
Yeah.
He was arrested and charged with 6 misdemeanor counts for refusing to abide by Governor John Bel Edwards' orders. And that's from the police department there in Baton Rouge. He said he held at least 6 gatherings, each count carrying a maximum penalty of 6 months in jail, which will never happen, and a $500 fine, which I'm certain that his 1,200 member church will be happy to pay.
Oh yes.
So they don't, so they can walk around with their persecution in place.
Yeah. Pretty much.
And we should point out, this is something that we read about in France, right? France, where a little something right here. There's a little bit of
little bug.
No, it's like some lint or something like right
here.
Weird.
Good thing nobody can see it.
Yeah. Over in France, the reason the outbreak started in France, you remember this? Mm-hmm. There was a week-long or 5-day-long prayer.
Like a prayer meeting, basically.
For 5 days in this town in northern France. And people from all over the world went there. And one nurse was asymptomatic. And while they were at this church meeting, she infected 151 other people. Yeah. And they were then able to spread the virus all over France because of one person. Yeah. And all the way off to Burkina Faso and to other islands that would maybe never have been affected by this. So it's not her fault, obviously, but this now becomes the responsibility of us knowing what it is, the responsibility of these people to say, the pastors to say, we can still do this online.
Yeah.
All right, it's not a violation of our personal freedoms. It's safe.
Yeah.
And this guy, and of course, they're all the people that are doing this are pretty far right evangelicals. They're not the majority, but it is important because they do have large followings.
They do.
And of course, he said he's being persecuted. He said, I pray the Spirit of God will reveal to the governor that I'm exercising my First Amendment rights and my freedom of worship and my freedom of religion rights. Turns out, by the way, those are your First Amendment rights.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to
spell them out for us.
You don't need to be redundant.
Thank you.
God help our nation today. Let them know that I'm exercising my mandate commanded to me by Jesus Christ to preach the gospel and to assemble as a people of God in this congregation. Paul was very specific that it wasn't a building. But yeah, so I hope he receives the maximum sentence.
Yep.
Nope, gotta go back to my other screen. There it is. No, fuck George Pell. I don't want to talk about him.
Okay, we'll just mention fuck George Pell. That's what we'll say.
Yeah, the pedophile priest.
Yeah.
Down in Australia that was convicted of shit. He's free.
Yeah, he's free. Fuck that guy.
Praise Jesus, I guess.
Ugh.
Not to be outdone by the Pastor Spell in Louisiana. Let's go over to England.
All right, you get to hold this for a little while because my hand hurts.
All right, I was kind of wondering. Let's see. We're going to look at it this way.
It's a little sweaty.
Oh, babes. There's a guy named Mark Overd. Overd. He's 55 years old, and he is from Tauntaun. I just did that on purpose. Probably not related to the Star Wars character. In Somerset, England. He preached at the center of this town, basically like at the town square type stuff. as a street preacher for over a decade. And then they told him recently, stop it for right now. Stop doing the street preaching stuff for right now because, pandemic.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm going to do what I want. And they said, cool, we're going to arrest you for that. And so they did. They packed up his Bibles. This comes from Fox News, so it's,
Yeah, it's got that persecution bent to it.
They removed him from the street, packed up his Bibles, and gave him a COVID-19 enforcement notice.
Ooh.
That must be like a new one. And he apparently, by the way, is known in that area as the most arrested preacher in England.
What do you have to do in order to be the most arrested anything in England, though?
I don't know. Like,
ignore pandemic rules?
No, they'll do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so he was arrested.
Yes.
And of course he's doing the exact same thing, persecution, yada yada. You're persecuting me because you're not letting me potentially be infected and then potentially infect hundreds, maybe thousands of people, and which would be like a deadly virus that we don't currently have a vaccine for and no immunity to.
Exactly.
Jesus would want me to preach, not listen to you guys. Let's see. And then going into the Middle East, Muslims around the world may need to postpone or even cancel any plans to make a pilgrimage to Mecca this year. It's the Hajj minister Mohammed Banten stated that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia was concerned about the safety of the millions endeavoring to make the treks to Mecca and Medina and urged people to, quote, wait before concluding contracts. This would be the first time, by the way, since the 1700s that it would even be postponed. Now, it is in July and August that they make their journey. But, they're obviously, and I appreciate Saudi Arabia, who has had, an outbreak there. And a lot of Muslims do come from Iran, where they have not contained anything. I appreciate their forward looking into that and staying, you need to stay safe with that. They've basically walled off the, I forget what the thing is called in the middle, the big, onyx square, the cube. I don't know. It's the cube.
Yeah. I'm going to do something really quick. We had somebody in the chat room, it was Shay actually, say to turn up just a skosh.
Oh.
There we go.
Thanks, Shay.
Let us know how that is.
Oh, you're in the chat.
I am
nice.
Currently in the chat room.
She's in the chat.
Hi. There's 10 of us in here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I hope you like the background. That tree is is currently blooming. All right. And then the one that's if you turn around, you can see the tree right behind you. It's got.
But you can't turn around.
It's got purple. I don't know, leaves. What are those?
Flowers.
Are they flowers?
It's flowers.
They're flowers on
They're
a tree.
Flowers.
On a tree. I don't know. Anyways.
Cherry blossoms?
Oh yeah. Those aren't cherry blossoms.
No, they're not cherry blossoms.
But there are plenty up here, along with the millions of evergreen trees.
Just a little more in the middle.
Well, did we change this?
No. It just a little more in the middle so they can both hear us.
Got it.
Both of us, rather.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I gotta get through this story, and it pisses me the fuck off. But there is some precedent to go over.
There is.
So
you did a lot of research on this one. So.
Yes, this was the one. If you were in a Discord server with me, I posted about it.
Yes. Yesterday,
which was April 7th, by the way, if you're watching this in the future, Kansas Governor Laura Kelly, in light of the pandemic and 1,000 plus confirmed infections in her state, along with, I think, 28 deaths so far, issued a executive order limiting churches and funerals to 10 people or less. Now, while this isn't the full closure we've seen in many states, it's certainly more than Florida, Texas, Michigan, and Ohio, which allowed churches to remain open, fully open, stating they are, quote, essential services. Now, I disagree. Now,
Same.
It should be noted that the executive order does not single out churches, yep, those bugs, man, but also includes auditoriums, theaters, movie theaters, taverns, pools, anything which is inside of an enclosed space and brings people close together, basically within that, the 6-7 foot range that where the virus spreads very easily.
Yeah.
And you know what? We should definitely state that the majority of pastors agree with the executive order. And here's some quotes. Dr. T. Lamont Holder, who's the president of the Missionary Baptist State Convention of Kansas, you guys got to work on making your names shorter, said the governor was, quote, greatly troubled by having to take these type of executive orders, and went on to say this is no time for spiritual extremism. It is the responsibility of each pastor and church to act responsibly and lead by example, to continue to place the health and welfare of our church members and the community at large in danger is biblically and morally irresponsible and reckless. He added this is no time for spiritual extremism. Tim Doremus, who is the pastor of the Life Church campus in East Wichita, said, we know ultimately that church is not a building. Church is not a service. It is a group of people who are following God, and so we are going to meet online. Reverend C.L. Bacchus of the Kansas City, Kansas, important note, Mount Zion Baptist Church says...
Is that where the Chiefs are from?
that football team in Kansas City, Missouri, that needs to change its name, said, I am calling the Christian community to follow Governor Kelly's executive order as it relates to social distancing and limited gatherings. We've had some difficult experiences in the religious community that makes this action necessary. What he's talking about, by the way, are the 3 clusters of outbreaks in Kansas, all 3 of which originated from church gatherings.
Yep.
I encourage you all to obey the mandate. It's time we use good common sense as well as exercise our faith during this difficult time. We are all in this together. Catholic Monsignor Stuart Svetland of Donnelly College in Kansas City, Kansas, says, everyone recognizes the religious liberty and First Amendment rights, but with rights also comes the duty to serve the common good. Right now, it is necessary for religious institutions to serve the common good and our common health by allowing this reasonable request from the governor. Reverend Shirley D. Hearmant down in at St. Mark's Church down in Wichita says that her church, or I'm sorry, Topeka, not Wichita, my apologies, would, quote, stand in support of this difficult decision. I appreciate, by the way, the pastor saying that it's a difficult decision.
Yeah.
The governor reached out to a lot of people. Okay, it's Kansas. There's not like a ton. There's enough.
A good number.
Yeah. Yeah. And they understood the reasoning. And I get that. By the way, I didn't actually take any quotes and cherry pick them. I couldn't find any other ones from pastors or anything. So, and I wouldn't do that anyway, because I'm not dishonest. Anyways, so apparently fuck the church pastors, because somebody's going to clip that and take it out of context. Because in less than 24 hours, the legislature in Kansas said, we don't think this is a good idea. But they didn't just say, we don't think this is going to be a good idea. They brought home the Constitution. And they said this. Senate President Susan Waggle said, I think they were just very upset with the fact that the government was going to tell them that they couldn't practice their religion. She's talking about apparently Christians. When asked if she was concerned more people will contract the virus and die, she said, don't tell us we can't practice our religious freedoms.
She makes me very, very sad to be a Susan.
Oh, yeah.
It's like you hear all this stuff about Karens. No, this is a thing with a Susan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I will take this L, wear it with pride.
GOP candidate Adrienne Vallejo Foster says, this is why I cannot sit idle and allow Governor Kelly to take our liberty for temporary safety. He also called on sheriffs to ignore the order, which, by the way, would have made it a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
The speaker, Rickman, Majority Leader Dan Hawkins, and Dan Hawkins, football coach. Probably not him. And Speaker Pro Tem Blaine Finch, they issued the following joint statement saying, however, the executive order goes too far in singling out one entity, remember those words, and limiting the free exercise of religion without any current data to indicate the need for this level of prohibition. Yeah, we don't have over 400,000 people currently infected in the United States. That's after you consider the people that have unfortunately passed away or those who have recovered. Right. This has not been done, or that has not been done with this executive order. This creates a patchwork of rules that would allow large groups to gather at the local mall, but not at their church. By the way, the local mall was actually put into the executive order, and it said those can remain open because there is reasonable accommodation for 6-foot rules, because they're wide open spaces.
But what about in the stores themselves?
The stores obviously have a different, a different standard, but the malls, because they have the wide areas where you're walking and stuff, there's not a I wouldn't have exempted them, but there's not a there's reasonable accommodation for that.
So, I can see that.
Yeah.
But then you run into the problem of every single store in the mall is closed, and then you just are stuck with a bunch of mall walkers.
Don't go to the mall.
Just don't go to the mall.
Yeah.
Problem solved.
We're not just saying don't go to church. Don't go to the mall.
Yeah.
I would say don't go to the theater, but I'm pretty certain they're all closed.
That's true.
And then, of course, the Attorney General, his name is Derek Schmidt, said, we also strongly discourage law enforcement from attempting to enforce the requirements of the executive order as violations of criminal law. In our view, Kansas statute and the Kansas Constitution's Bill of Rights each forbid the governor from criminalizing participation in worship gatherings by executive order. There's the breeze we were talking about.
Yep. You can hear it too.
So that's not all the quotes either. No, there are more.
There's a lot more.
They voted on this and revoked it today on party lines. Not everybody was there, by the way, the entire council. And they didn't, I think that they were in Topeka, which, by the way, geography fact, that's the capital of Kansas. It's not Kansas City, Mr. President. They were in Topeka today, but there were only a few of them. So not only are these people incredibly dangerous, they're also very wrong. And I went and found out why. You can ask Susan. I spent a little bit of time searching for Supreme Court records.
Yes, he did.
And trying to figure out if what they were saying was true. Does this have precedent? It's going to surprise you, I think. It doesn't. What they're saying doesn't have precedent. According to the Department of Justice's Federal Law Protections for Religious Liberty, which was signed on October 6th, 2017. Who was president in 2017?
I think it was your buddy. I can't do the impression. I'm not good at the Barack Obama impression. I'm really not.
He ain't my buddy.
I tried.
But Donald Trump was president, which means that his administration signed this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Section 7, which is the government may not target religious individuals or entities through discriminatory enforcement of neutral generally applicable laws, says, although government generally may subject religious persons and organizations to neutral, generally applicable laws, for example, across-the-board criminal prohibitions. Remember that word prohibition, right? Or certain time, place, and manner restrictions on speech, government may not apply such laws in a discriminatory way. Mm-hmm. For instance, the IRS may not enforce the Johnson Amendment, which prohibits 501c3 nonprofit organizations from intervening in a political campaign on behalf of a candidate, against a religious nonprofit under circumstances in which it would not enforce the amendment against a secular nonprofit. Mm-hmm. Section 10, which is the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993, prohibits the federal government from substantially burdening any aspect of religious observation, also mowing the yard while we're on live stream, unless imposition of that burden on a particular religious adherent satisfies strict scrutiny. Mm-hmm. Strict scrutiny, by the way, qualifies in this case. It says it prohibits the federal government from substantially burdening the person's exercise of religion unless the federal government demonstrates that an application of such burden to the religious adherent is the least restrictive means of achieving a compelling government interest. Least restrictive, which means you can't go to church, but you can still fucking worship. And you can do it on live stream. So that's least restrictive. Also saying that if you have 10 people, you can go there. And by the way, the 10 people the pastors and administration are not included. So you can have more than 10 people up on, like, that it takes to put the church together and all that. I don't know, whatever it does, worship and all that.
I don't know.
As long as they're 6 feet apart. You can only have 10 people in the church, which means this is the least restrictive you could possibly be.
Yeah.
Section 14, the strict scrutiny standard applicable is exceptionally demanding. Once a religious adherent has identified a substantial burden, the federal government can impose that burden only if it is the least restrictive means of achieving a compelling governmental interest. Only those interests of the highest order can outweigh legitimate claims to the free exercise of religion, and such interests must be evaluated not in broad generalities, but as applied to the particular adherent. Even if the federal government could show the necessary interest, it would also have to show that its chosen restriction on free exercise is the least restrictive means of achieving that interest. The government must show that it cannot accommodate the religious adherent while achieving its interest through a viable alternative, which may include in certain circumstances expenditure of additional funds, modification of existing exemptions, or creation of a new program. What that means, and what all these mean, and by the way, feel free to go watch that. All links in the description after the show is over because we didn't put them in beforehand because I don't know how.
I'll get it figured out.
You can go and read the whole thing. Where what it means is that they can do this because it is for the common good.
Yeah.
It's not persecution, and also because it's not discriminatory. Because it does not affect just churches or just a particular religion. It also mentions that things to do with mosques and stuff in the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. So this bullshit.
We can say that on here.
You're going to get people killed.
Yeah.
Stop it. Yeah. Let's end the news on a positive note, though.
Yes.
Down in Panama. Love Panama. There is an archbishop from a Catholic church, but I forget his name. I put it there.
Did you put this in here?
Yeah. It's right above this.
Oh, yeah. No.
No, it's above the Kansas one.
No.
And it's this one right there. His name is
Cool.
Jose Domingo Ulloa, however you pronounce that. He said this past Sunday, with Palm Sunday, he said, you know what? We can't have people inside the church because it's unsafe because this is what he said to himself. I am a reasonable person. And he said, but nobody should have to not be able to celebrate God coming through and murdering a bunch of Egyptian kids. And cattle, by the way. Exodus, read it. So he said, I'm going to get in a helicopter. And he got in a helicopter. He had his magenta robes on, by the way, because he apparently is sponsored by T-Mobile.
Oh, this guy.
Yeah. And he had the this big, I don't know, huge, looks like a sun god thing. And he got in a helicopter and flew over the capital city. And he was, with basically celebrating Easter Palm Sunday.
Yeah.
And people in the city, they laid out like palm branches and stuff on their porches and whatnot. And of course, Panama's closed down, and you can't go anywhere on Sundays anyway. So they would be out like on their porches and did that.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You celebrate Palm Sunday, Jesus going into Jerusalem on either one or two asses. So you either rode one or two Donald Trumps. I don't know. And and a helicopter too. That's pretty legit stuff. His big pink robe is super cool, by the way.
Pretty nifty.
So yeah, we decided to end the the news section not on the Kansas note.
No.
Because God, Kansas, come on.
Fucking Kansas.
Yeah. But Susan has an amazing deep dive today, and I'm going to let her just take it away. So I'm going to take my coffee over here.
You do have coffee.
I'm going to go over here.
Let me I'm just going to hold it like this.
Cool.
So I don't, do anything wrong with it. Hopefully I don't accidentally mute myself, because that would be bad. Okay. So, my deep dives, as y'all know, aren't usually quite as biblical as Nathaniel's. Mine are usually a little bit more about like Christian culture and the people that affect our everyday lives, basically. So you've probably heard the term conversion therapy at some point in the past and have an idea of what it entails, but you might not be able to actually describe it to someone. And believe me, that's understandable. Most of what a lot of us know about this heinous practice is, we just know that it does more harm than good. So, because, hi, I'm Susan and I love Wikipedia, Wikipedia just defines it as the pseudoscientific practice of trying to change an individual's sexual orientation from homosexual or bisexual to heterosexual using psychological or spiritual interventions. Now, it should also be pointed out that it's not just having to do with someone's sexuality, it can also have to do with their gender identity as well. Those who practice it often refer to it as reparative therapy, which, no. It uses a lot of methods like behavioral modification, ex-gay ministry is a big part of it, sex therapy, and at one point in the past, in like the 40s and 50s, treatment included lobotomies. Yeah, that was a thing. So, the first one that we're going to go over is behavioral modification. So prior to the removal of homosexuality from the DSM in 1973, most of the behavioral modification included some extreme techniques in an attempt to condition the patient out of their supposedly wicked ways, like electroshock therapy and drugs that would induce nausea while simultaneously being shown same-sex erotic images. While the drugs are wearing off, they were shown an abundance of opposite-sex erotic images as they, came down, as they were off of stuff, while they recovered from the electroshocks, things of that nature. Now, very few studies were actually done on the efficacy of these practices, but there's a paper called Aversion Therapy for Sexual Deviation, a critical review, written by M.P. Feldman. He claimed a 58% cure rate, with the success being defined as a, quote, suppression of homosexuality and increased capacity for heterosexual behavior. And, of course, like you would expect, these practices are often widely regarded within the psychological and psychiatric communities as being forms of torture, because they are. Now, next we're going to move on to ex-gay ministry. This one has a lot of different moving parts in it because it involves a lot of different stuff. So, of course, back to our old pal Wikipedia. I say that it consists of people and organizations that encourage people to refrain from entering or pursuing same-sex relationships, to eliminate homosexual desires, and to develop heterosexual desires, or to enter into a heterosexual relationship. So there are organizations like Love in Action or Exodus International, which is a non-denominational organization. There's Courage International for the Catholics, North Star for the Mormons who are looking for ex-gay ministry, Jonah for the Jewish folks, and Brothers on a Road Less Traveled, which is formerly known as People Can Change. I think that one is also a non-denominational one as well. And finally, we have One by One, which is strictly for the Presbyterians. Strictly Presbyterians. Sorry, Lutherans. So they each have their own methodologies and their definitions of change. So Exodus International says that it consists of people and organizations that encourage people to refrain from entering or pursuing same-sex relationships, to eliminate homosexual desires and develop heterosexual desires, or to enter into this heterosexual relationship, which I just realized is the exact same thing as I read earlier. So that's cool. Trying to speed through that so you don't notice. Brothers on a Road Less Traveled define their success, their what they deem success as any degree of change toward greater peace, satisfaction, and fulfillment, and less shame, depression, and darkness. I feel like, though, they're going to define the shame, depression, and darkness as something entirely different as you or I would. Now, ex-gay ministry does tend to focus on influencing public policy in the form of anti-LGBTQ+ legislation and public perception, while preying on vulnerable LGBTQ+ individuals who may be in a really bad place. They offer to solve pretty much all of their problems, say we can make all of this go away. But as it turns out, no. There is no consensus on if ex-gay ministry can actually be considered a form of conversion therapy, but it is widely associated with conversion therapy because of the overwhelming presence of religious figures in both situations. So next we have sex therapy. This one was the one I had to go the deepest into. So there was a research team that was comprised of 2 people, William H. Masters and Virginia E. Johnson. They conducted studies and were at the forefront of the research into the nature of human sexual response and the diagnosis and treatment of sexual disorders and dysfunctions. The research ran from about 1957 until sometime in the 1990s. I didn't really find a definite ending date. So their initial phases, from 1957 to 1965, they actually recorded some of the first lab data on the anatomy and physiology of the human sexual response. However, from 1968 to 1977, the Masters and Johnson Institute ran a conversion therapy program, with the initial theory about the efficacy of conversion therapy proposed by Masters, in the Masters and Johnson treatment program for dissatisfied homosexual men. It said, pre-treatment counseling aims at improving the patient's dating, sexual, and intimacy skills, creative problem solving, and stress management. I mean, I could use creative problem solving and stress management. Really good. Yeah. Then for 2 weeks, the patient and an opposite sex partner living in social isolation meet daily with a therapy team to address fears and anxieties about intimacy as they arise. Now, this particular program did report a 71.6% success rate over a 6-year period, but Johnson, in addition to having reservations about Masters and his conversion therapy program, also said that, quote, at worst, the results of the study may have been fabricated by William Masters. There was a gentleman, Robert C. Kolodny, we're going to say that, who also expressed reservations about the veracity of the findings in Masters' book on the topic, and alleged that Masters had actually not kept the case files of the studies that he went into and cited in the book. So, next we have the extreme lobotomies. So this is not fun. We say it's fun in a sarcastic manner, but this is realistically, it's really not fun, and it's really gross. So during the 40s and 50s, Walter Freeman, who's a neurologist from the United States, of course, popularized the ice pick lobotomy treatment for homosexuality. And now, despite no formal surgical training, Freeman allegedly performed approximately 3,400 lobotomy surgeries in about 23 states, which includes 2,500 that used the ice pick method. And, I mean, unsurprisingly, the lobotomies ended up leaving the patients severely disabled for the remainder of their lives. Now, the can I say efficacy again? Is that going to be too many times saying efficacy?
No, it's a good word.
It's a good word. So the efficacy of lobotomy to change sexual orientation did become the subject of critical research in 1948. There was a single case that was studied by Joseph Friedlander and Ralph Benet in their publication, Psychosis Following Lobotomy in a Case of Sexual Psychopathy. And it followed a lobotomy procedure and its subsequent effects on a patient who was a sex offender with no previously reported psychoses. because I could only view a very, very short section of that paper, it basically started out that he was a repeat sex offender. He did have these tendencies to, as quote-unquote homosexual tendencies, as they put it, because it was, the 1940s and 50s. And apparently it was enough of a problem that they felt a need to lobotomize him. They did the ice pick lobotomy, and he, after a certain number of years, I don't remember the number of years, but after a certain number of years, he started reporting psychoses, like he was hallucinating and seeing things, hearing things, etc. So that was pretty much the only really big case study that we had pertaining to the ice pick lobotomies. And of course they weren't effective. None of this stuff is. Now, minors. So, as many of y'all know, I was the treasurer for the Texas Democratic Secular Caucus. And the Secular Caucus has worked a lot to get conversion therapy for minors banned in the state of Texas. They're working all around the state in order to, make sure that these kids are protected, basically. So minors who undergo conversion therapy are more than 8 times more likely to have contemplated suicide, nearly 6 times as likely to report high levels of depression, more than 3 times more likely to use illegal drugs, and more than 3 times more likely to be at high risk for HIV and STIs. So, widely across a number of official organizations, this is a very small sampling of what they officially say on conversion therapy having to do with minors. This comes from the American Academy of Child Adolescent Psychiatry. Quote, "The American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry finds no evidence to support the application of any therapeutic intervention operating under the premise that a specific sexual orientation, gender identity, and/or gender expression is pathological." From the American Academy of Pediatrics, quote, "Therapy directed at specifically changing sexual orientation is contraindicated since it can provoke guilt and anxiety while having little or no potential for achieving changes in orientation." From the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy, "The association does not consider homosexuality a disorder that requires treatment, and as such, we see no basis for reparative therapy. It expects its members to practice based on the best research and clinical evidence available." Now, you see what we're getting at. There's a lot of them. I could go on. I don't have all of them, but still. Widely among the medical community, it is seen that conversion therapy, or quote, reparative therapy, is not effective. I feel like all of us watching this and having to do with this know that conversion therapy is not effective. We knew this. Medical associations know this. And there's tons of criticism of it, of course. So Jack Drescher and Kenneth J. Zucker wrote Ex-Gay Research Analyzing the Spitzer Study and its Relation to Science, Religion, Politics, and Culture. They said, quote, "Reparative therapy is neither reparative nor therapy. It is, rather, destructive pseudotherapy." They also said, "In recent years, noted practitioners of reparative therapy have openly integrated psychoanalytic theories that pathologize homosexuality with traditional religious beliefs condemning homosexuality. There has also been an increasing body of religious thought arguing against traditional biblical interpretations that condemn homosexuality and that underlie religious types of reparative therapy." So even from within religion, they're saying, hey, let's not do this. And that book is from, like, the 70s, I think. I don't know. I didn't write it down. I'm sorry. I should have been really, really good at citing my sources so far. So from Psychoanalytic Therapy and the Gay Man by Jack Drescher, says, "Reparative therapists' belief can create unreasonable expectations in their clients. Some of them are people who are desperately attempting to conform to heterosexual normativity. The implication that it is primarily the patient's motivation to change that determines the success or failure of reparative therapy only reinforces feelings of failure and incompetence in people who cannot change." So the Trevor Project's website has a section on conversion therapy that has 2 questions. First one is, does conversion therapy work? The answer is no. And is conversion therapy harmful? The answer is yes. It says, the risks of conversion therapy extend far beyond its ineffectiveness and the time and money wasted on therapies that don't work. And from the National Center for Lesbian Rights, their website says, all of the nation's leading professional medical and mental health associations have rejected conversion therapy as unnecessary, ineffective, and dangerous. And it also answers a similar question. Can any type of therapy change a person's sexual orientation or gender identity? The answer is still no. Conversion therapy sometimes ends up in the news. More often than not, it is pertaining to when states are trying to ban it, when cities are trying to ban it, when entire countries are trying to ban it. So most recently, activists have urged the City Council of Tallahassee, Florida, of all places, to pass a conversion therapy ban ordinance that would be the most inclusive in the nation and the most robust in the state of Florida. And currently, 23 states have bans that are pending at the moment, and Obama actually toyed with the idea of a nationwide ban during his 2nd term in office. So Wikipedia does have a list of countries that either have partial or full bans of conversion therapy, including full ban countries like Argentina, Brazil, Ecuador, and Fiji. That's pretty cool. So as recently as a month ago, Canada was working on its own nationwide ban with legislation that was introduced in early March and would fulfill one of Justin Trudeau's campaign promises, which, right on for that. That's cool. It would criminalize things like forcing people to undergo conversion therapy, advertising and profiting from conversion therapy, and removing a minor from Canada in order to force them to go to conversion therapy. You're going to be sick of that term by the time you're done with me. It would also authorize courts to remove any ads pertaining to the practice. And a lot of people who have undergone conversion therapy have been telling their stories more and more lately, with the actual founder of one of the most prominent practices in the United States that had more than 20 years of experience coming out of the closet in mid-2019. So, now that you've heard my whole spiel, what is the biggest takeaway from this barrage of information that I just gave you? That's going to have to be that the practice of conversion therapy is not only useless, but is also extremely detrimental to those who are forced to go through it. The people who perpetuate this practice are not only child abusers, but also con artists. Woo! It's a real heavy subject.
Yeah.
It's real heavy. Let's switch.
There is so much pollen out here.
Are you? I am like.
No, I noted. Remember earlier when I was looking at.
Oh, that's what's on my phone.
And then look at the El Gato.
Oh my gosh.
And you can see it on the base of the monitor.
You can.
There is a lot of it.
It's wacky.
So
you get that.
Okay. Let's see.
My hand hurts.
This is the front over here. So in the chat, Shay was bringing up, of course. Where did I found it in here? Conversion therapy, she says, is often applied to trans people as well.
Yeah. That's why I tried to make it a point to make sure that the mention of gender identity and gender expression was included. Conversion therapy tends to focus a lot on sexual orientation and making sure that, it gets fixed, which we all know this stuff isn't stuff to fix. We all know that. I mean, come on.
No, that was great and a lot of information, stuff that I didn't know.
Yeah, thank you.
For sure. And I was also enjoying the standing out here and looking around. It is really pretty here.
Nice out here.
If you have the opportunity to come up here and visit us, please do after it's safe to do so. At the end of the deep dive, as always, we have our book recommendations. We didn't go over this. I just happened to bring mine out. You want to hand me mine?
Yes.
This is a book that I am both currently reading, which is all of my books, by the way.
Yeah, he reads everything simultaneously.
Yeah. This one is by historian and scholar Robin Lane Fox. He is a phenomenal guy. I think he's over at Oxford now, or he might be retired. And it's called Truth and Fiction in the Bible, and this is called the unauthorized version. I like what he did version. There. It goes into an incredible amount of scholarship that's actually really easy to read, and provides a lot of source material. Folks that I have personally, and I feel like I know this topic fairly well, have never heard of. And so going and finding that, and she can tell you as I was going through stuff yesterday, because we do have a video coming up. We're trying to get it out before Easter.
Trying very hard.
No promises.
We'll see.
I was going through, it's a response video, and was going through and doing some more research yesterday, and I found some of these people that, and some of like their papers and stuff. And I was like, how many times did I stop you from your work and say, oh my gosh, look what I found?
That would be a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
And this book really helps with that. It has the index of authors and sources, like primary sources, as well as your yeah, it's the second time we've heard something like that. Yeah.
There's a rumble.
I don't know. And it's also, and you can find it at Nope Publishing, Knope. So Leslie's probably there. As well as, I actually found this one. This one's used. Yeah. So, and it,
it's on Amazon.
Yeah, turns out it's still easy to read. So do recommend that.
I got nothing. Thank you. Is it lint?
No, it wasn't.
Pollen. I got nothing, but I do have channel recommendations.
Oh, I was gonna do the channel we were talking to earlier today. Like I was gonna, because I figured. The uncles.
Oh yeah.
I figured that's who you'd want to talk about.
Well, yes, I certainly can.
Yeah, so go ahead.
I certainly can.
Hi. I didn't know who you were going to.
Oh, I was gonna go with the one that I discovered last night.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
we can each do one.
You know more about both of those than I do.
I do. Okay, so.
So they sound like in Hamilton.
So I'm taking over both recommendations this evening because he did. Yeah, I don't have a book. I'm sorry. Because I listen to more stuff than I read. That's how I get it. So the two that I have, I discovered one last night because I just went ahead and YouTube searched for atheist and clicked live to see who was streaming. And there is one called Your Friendly Neighborhood Atheist. And I was watching him. It was like the end of the stream. I was watching him. I think their names are Ethan and Puck, I think is what the one goes by. I
caught like 4 minutes of it.
Yeah, it was really interesting. He was having a conversation with a Christian, with a pastor, I believe.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Ooh. Yeah.
Not the ooh that you shouldn't talk to pastors, but really?
Yeah.
That guy?
Yeah.
Oh,
that guy's pastor.
He's gonna come watch this now. I'm sorry, dude.
Sorry. But yeah, no, he was able to support his arguments with logic and reason, and it was really, really interesting to watch that from sort of a different perspective than you, because I watch you with that stuff so often, talking to people and having, bouncing ideas back and forth and having ideas challenged.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting to see it coming from a different person.
Mm-hmm.
And how they are able to, thought process and everything. So that was really good. It's called Your Friendly Neighborhood Atheist. So that's really good. It's a relatively small channel, but yeah. I really liked it.
Yeah,
so it was pretty cool.
Kind of like our channel. Really,
yeah.
They don't do anything like what we do, but as far as like subscribers and stuff, and they do live streams. So
yeah. So always a good time. They're really good. And then, so I feel like I might have talked about them before, but they're my absolute favorite because they're my favorite audio uncles. So if you have not listened to the How to Heretic, which is amazing, it is 3 ex-Mormons. I feel like I have talked about them before. 3 ex-Mormons, and they talk about things having to do actually with, the Mormon church and coming out of Mormonism and coming out of religion in general. It's not just people who are leaving the faith, it's people who are, it might just be people who are just leaving Mormonism.
It's the same tree.
I think so, I guess. I don't know.
This is, sorry,
Distractions.
it's Allie's fault. This is in her yard. It has like the same branches.
Yes, it does. And the blooms look the same.
What is known as an Aria magnolia?
That's cool.
That's cool.
That's cool.
That's right behind.
Thanks, Leah. I
Right
appreciate
behind you.
you.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
But yeah, they're absolutely wonderful. There was an episode a few weeks ago that I was listening to on my drive up here. We've tried not to talk a ton about it because I know a lot of people are talking about like the COVID-19 stuff, and but right now this situation for someone like me is a very, very real situation.
Yeah.
I have an autoimmune disease. I'm type 1 diabetic, which is an autoimmune disease, which means I'm more susceptible to getting sick, and it takes me longer to get over that sickness or to heal from something. It took me a good 8 months to have my broken ankle heal.
Yeah.
Like, and it still hurts. Mm-hmm. So,
Screw you, Big Ben. Love you.
I love Big Ben so much, though.
Me too.
But
American healthcare system.
Right? I need to do like this instead. There we go. But one of the gentlemen, he goes by Uncle Mark. He's my absolute favorite. Was talking about how it's very real for him and his husband as well. And it was right when there was an earthquake in Utah, so everybody was really freaked out. And, he's giving these very, very realistic and very, very, grounded pieces of advice for what to do when you're just scared shitless because of something like this. Mm-hmm. And I was driving through the Dells coming up here. I was so close to being here, and I was just driving and I just started crying. And I wrote an email to him like about a week and a half later and just, tell him the story and stuff. And he was just all like, oh my God, thank you. And I'm just all like, I love you. You're the best. I love you.
I love you. Somebody's dog was...
Oh, yeah. Do you have anything? Any channel recommendations for you?
No, I figured that since I had the book that you were going to go over that. Obviously,
I got
How to Heretic, they're fabulous. So
yes.
I do look forward to looking into the friendly neighborhood atheist.
Yeah.
Unique. I like that name.
Yeah, it's really cool. I like it.
But I think we're just past 7 o'clock. Thanks so much, everybody that's joined us this evening. It certainly means a lot to us that you are here. We, of course, will be, broadcasting again next Wednesday.
I need to switch places with you.
Yeah, I think you do.
Yeah, I do.
Don't know if we're going to be outside or not. That kind of depends all on the weather as well as kind of our situation in the home as well. Some of our stuff still isn't here yet.
No, and it is scheduled to get here on like the 16th, I think.
15th or 16th, yeah. So we're still,
we're sleeping on an air mattress.
Currently, yeah.
But
that's interesting. But we do have, like I said, we have a video planned, a premiere video.
Yes. Instead of a live stream.
Which means that how much I messed this up, I plan on messing that video up even more.
Please
no. I think that'll be okay because we can set it for a time. But that is pretty much it for us this evening. And yeah, we're still in the middle of this, folks. And we don't leave the house very often. And we don't recommend that you do either unless you are essential.
Yeah.
Church is not essential.
It is not.
Love you folks from the depth of my being. Love you, seriously. Even you evangelical far-right people who think that killing me is okay. I still love you, and I don't want you to get sick or die. So please stay inside. Wash your hands. If you have a beard, good luck not touching your face. But please do that.
Wash your fucking hands.
Yeah. And of course, we're on a bunch of different Discord servers. We don't have one of our own.
No, not yet.
So,
but you can catch us.
Yeah.
Pretty much anywhere. I was on In Time. I was on In Time the other day.
We're going to be on Atheist Pastor next Friday.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
you can usually catch us in people's after parties and stuff.
Yeah, Neil the 604 Atheist. He's a good friend of ours. And so you'll find us around there. I'm also on Discord and a bunch of other servers. Surus and Ocean and Mikey and I don't know. I got a list of 6 or 7 of them. Keep on getting invited to more, and then my computer's like ding, 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 ding. God. So
that's why you turn off the notifications.
But we will see all of you and more.
Looks like I'm interviewing you.
The universe willing. Gotta look past the camera, right? The universe willing, we will see all of you again next time, very, very soon. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your week. This button right here.